Okay, we're going to talk about using the information that we've learned. So, we've learned about metabolism. What can that tell us about how a cow works, how a cow does? So, one of the first things we need to kind of clarify here is that carbohydrates are needed to oxidize fat. And the phrase that's often used is fat burns in the light of carbohydrates. So, what do we mean by that? Well, we have our carbohydrates here coming down, we have our fats coming around here. We have our two carbon units in transition that are going to be added to a four carbon unit, and that's going to make a six carbon unit. And then we lose a CO2, we lose a CO2, and then we regenerate the oxaloacetate, oxaloacetic acid, this four carbon here. So we need these four carbon units. They are considered carbohydrates, and we need those to burn our two carbon units coming out of beta oxidation, coming out of transition. But if you want to burn fats, the bulk of your fats are going to come through the fatty acid, the energy, beta oxidation, those two carbon units going in. So, in order to make all this work, we need these carbohydrates that are the um, TCA cycle here to make sure it works. If we don't have those there, these two carbon units have nowhere to go, and that becomes the basis of ketosis. So, what happens when fat metabolism fails? We're in this case, we're looking at cows and ketosis. What's going to happen is that oxidation is not going to be working correctly. Specifically, we're not going to have the carbon units here that we need to bring in that two carbon unit and burn it completely to CO2 and water. These um, units here are being stolen and used for other purposes. What do we mean by that? So we already mentioned when we talked about hypocalcemia that one of the problems we run into with our cows is we get decreased intake, increased fat mobilization, and that's going to predispose her to ketosis. So we've got too much fat in the system, it's not being processed efficiently, and we get a backup that leads to ketosis. So we looked at our metabolism going through. We've got our fats potentially coming in here in our liver, and they're going to be broken up. The glycerol is going to go GTO. The fatty acids broken up in two, and they're going to feed directly into oxidation. The problem is with ketosis, oxidation is not working the way it should. So this really doesn't help for that story, but we can see where things normally flow. If we've got a place to get rid of our fats, dump them in the udder, we can avoid that um, backup. But when we're talking about a dry cow predisposing to fatty liver, that dump here, that putting it in the milk, we can't do that quite yet because she's not milking. So ketosis, what's going to happen with ketosis? So we're going to have mobilization of our fats. They're going to come into the fat pool and they're going to start to back up in the liver. And that's where we run into trouble. We get too much fat in the liver, it's not being burned efficiently to CO2 and water, and we get a backup of components, we get a backup of fat, and that can lead to fatty liver and ketosis. What is actually happening here? This is a different presentation of that kind of whole body. If you want to see the full article here, it's down at the Progressive Dairyman, but I like this diagram here. We've called our triglycerides TG. These are triacylglycerides. It's a synonym. We take our, we have a lot of fat coming in. We break our fats down. This is fat prep here. We got our fatty acids and glycerol. Those fatty acids, non-esterified fatty acids, ester linkage. So if it's not linked, that means it's a free fatty acid, or a NEFA is what it's usually called out in the world. During fat prep, we take those fatty acids, we got to break them down into 2 carbon units. They're fed into oxidation and they should go to CO2 and water. If that system is not working like it should, oxidation is not working like it should, we're going to get a buildup of those 2 carbon units. They're not being burned. We have to get rid of them, do something with them. They end up as ketones in the body, which leads to ketosis. So this is the re-fat synthesis, the NEFA back to triglyceride. This is a carrier, VLDL is a carrier, very low density lipoprotein carrier or stored fat. Either one would probably be a problem in the liver. So stored fat, we don't want that. That's fatty liver. What we want to do is get rid of it. So that fat needs to leave, go somewhere else. We hope we export that fat in some way, shape, or form. Ketosis. Some people call it a sugar deficiency. I call it an overload of ketones in the body caused by metabolic uh, errors, fat metabolism errors. So to me, it's the excess of the ketones that cause the problem. They cause the cow not to feel good, to stop eating. All those issues add up when we have the excess ketone happens. So we have the fat prep over here. Our fatty acids are broken down by beta oxidation. We have the 2 carbon units being generated, and they're going to be added right here. The problem is we don't have the machinery here. We don't have the 4 carbon units to start this roller coaster ride around to burn that 2 carbon unit to CO2 and water. So basically, what happens in the liver is oxidation is compromised, it's shut down. So if the 2 carbon units can't get into oxidation, they start to back up. We get lots of extra 2 carbon units. And then the body says, well, I got all this stuff. I can't have it in here. I've got to export it. I got to get rid of it. The body converts those 2 carbon units into ketones, and that's where we get into trouble. So we got to think about metabolism. Keto sticks are what measures those ketones, the little strips that change color, and that dark purple is never what you want to see. We treat with dextrose and propylene glycol. So we want to think about what the problem is, how do we diagnose it, and then how do we fix the problem. So that 2 carbon unit, we're going to call it acetic acid. You can see that in the diagram. We got to get rid of these things. We can't have these floating around. They're a problem. So the body generally creates ketones. So we have acetoacetic acid, which is basically 2 of these stuck together. We have, I'm guessing that's the same thing down here. We can also have acetone generated by a ketone, or beta hydroxybutyrate, BHB, can also be generated. So the difference here, ketone group versus an alcohol. There, 4 carbons, 4 carbons, 3 carbons. All these compounds can be generated. Some people are very good at smelling them on a cow's breath. So one of the treatments we use is dextrose. So if we take a good look at this label, dextrose. We've got 56 grams in this bottle. So what is dextrose? Dextrose is carbohydrate. So it's basically glucose we're adding to the body. And as we said, fats burn in the light of carbohydrates. So what we're trying to do with dextrose is to restock that oxidation, put the carbohydrates back in there to get the system rolling again, the roller coaster moving again, so we can bring in those units, we can burn them to CO2 and water instead of having them back up. Or the other problem is that gluconeogenesis for milk production will steal units from the oxidation. So instead, maybe this glucose goes to lactose to create milk. So we spare the TCA cycle and keep that up and running. Dextrose, glucose there also. So glucose, 6-carbon compound, also known as dextrose or grape sugar. If you ever tasted it, not much taste to it. The taste comes when you put the fructose and glucose together to make sucrose. So we can also get some glucose help, either with propylene glycol, which is this 3 carbon. So this is going to go into the liver, go to gluconeogenesis and help create carbohydrates that are going to fix oxidation, or go to the udder and spare oxidation, being having its parts stolen, basically its wheels taken off. Calcium gluconate, that's another way we can add glucose carbohydrates to the body to help burn that fat, help to fix that ketosis. What happens? We get the fat being processed in the liver. The oxidation isn't working right, so those 2 carbon units do not join the cycle, do not take the ride in oxidation, do not get burned to CO2 and water. So they back up in the system, get exported, and they become ketones that cause all the problem. Diagnosis, the ketones are fairly fat soluble. That means they can move anywhere in the body they want to. When they move, they're going to go everywhere, and that includes the urine, the milk as well. We can measure the ketones in the urine with our keto sticks. So we get a diagnosis that way. We can also, the cow is listless, off feed, not eating well, losing weight very rapidly. All those can be used as diagnosis. In the short term, acute, we're going to give glucose or gluconeogenic precursors. So basically 6 carbon units as dextrose, or propylene glycol is going to be a 3 carbon unit that's going to help generate glucose in the liver. The main prevention is we have to keep the carbohydrates in the TCA cycle. The best way to keep carbohydrates in the body is to make sure that we've got a good fermentation going, and to generate glucose from our fermentation, we need propionic acid. So basically, we want to keep the cow on feed. Generally, ketosis makes her want to stop eating, but if we can get her on feed, get her eating, we're going to have the propionate going to the liver, being made into glucose by gluconeogenesis, and then that carbohydrate can help keep the oxidation cycle running, help burn that carbohydrate will help burn the fats to CO2 and water. We don't get the backup. The cow feels much better. So symptoms, think about that, and then we can review that on Tuesday. Best way to correct or prevent ketosis is to keep the cow eating. That's our goal. If anything that she does that takes her off feed will predispose her to ketosis. We want to keep her on feed, keep the fermentation going, keep the propionate being absorbed and being created into glucose in the body. So here's kind of the cycle we're looking at. We got negative energy balance for any number of reasons. She stops eating, she's sick, around calving, not feeling so good. You got a backup of the system. Negative energy balance is going to lead to increased adipose mobilization. So the triglyceride is going to leave the adipose tissue. We can see in the blood we're going to have increased triglyceride or increased NEFAs in the blood. That's going to end up in the liver. The liver becomes overloaded. We have so much there, we're trying to process, trying to get rid of it. We step up fat prep, but we don't have enough carbohydrate to keep oxidation running. So either the system is overloaded, there's just too much coming in to get the job done, or the machinery of oxidation is stolen to make glucose somewhere else in the body, either in the liver or the glucose is stolen by the mammary gland to give to the calf. So if we have increased fat prep, decreased oxidation, we're going to get a backup of 2 carbon units in the system. The liver's got to get rid of them. They'll take those 2 carbon units, make 3 carbon, 4 carbon ketones. Those ketones, as we said, are lipophilic and they can go anywhere in the body. They generally create a uniform concentration. So blood ketones is proportional to urine ketones, is proportional to milk ketones. So it doesn't really matter which one you measure. The lipophilic allows it to be uniform throughout the body. It isn't barred to moving anywhere, and generally that increased ketones leads to poorer health. So that's kind of the pathway. We need to fix this part by adding dextrose or propylene glycol. We got to fix the oxidation. So instead of building up, those 2 carbon units are being burned to CO2 and water, and that's how we get the cow fixed. We focus on getting her through that. So BST, not many people use it around here anymore. More popular out west. It's an injection we can give, supplemental BST, also called bovine growth hormone, protein hormone from the anterior pituitary. Spend more time on that in a little bit. BST partitions extra nutrients from storage. So instead of building up body condition, it's going to say, hey, we're going to feed a calf for a little bit more milk production. And the effects of BST work through the liver. As we mentioned in metabolism, BST goes to the liver. It starts a hormone cascade, IGF. IGF goes to the adipose and mammary gland and says, hey, let's, instead of putting this over here, we're going to put it in the udder and allow for more milk production. So BST does not work without extra nutrients. The cow needs to be in a positive energy balance. So anybody who's ever given it, know you have to wait 8 weeks, according to label, 56 days before you can give it. And it's an allower, not a driver. So it's a partitioning agent. If there's extra nutrients there, the animal will take advantage of them. So here's an illustration of that. Inadequate nutrition, we have the somatotropin, the IGF system from the liver secreted. It's going to take the nutrient pool and it's going to shift it over to the mammary gland. The BST is going to have a positive effect on taking stuff out of the adipose tissue and a negative effect on putting stuff in. So as long as there's enough nutrients, they will shift to the mammary gland. If there's not much they can do, the cow can do. It's not permissible with a lack of nutrients. So you need that positive energy balance to get things done. So how does BST work if we're looking at the synthesis of milk? To take the nutrients and we're going to put them into the mammary gland. So we're focusing on the fat here, body condition. We're going to put it in the mammary gland, put it in the milk, and not away in the adipose tissue for later use. So BST is going to shift or swing that um, those nutrients toward milk composition. Milk fat depression. It's a metabolic disorder in cows where the cow puts out 50% or more drop or greater drop in milk production. So we're looking at a Holstein 1-2%. We identify that animal as milk fat depressed. Two things are required for milk fat depression: an abnormal rumen fermentation. So usually we think about acidosis, subclinical acidosis, and an excess of polyunsaturated fats, fatty acids, so PUFAs. So how does milk fat depression occur? We have an excess of unsaturated unsaturated fatty acids getting to the mammary gland. And there's one specific, cis 10 trans 12, I believe it is. Might be a trans 10 cis 12. I can't remember which off the top of my head. That gets to the mammary gland. So when the rumen is working right, very little unsaturated fatty acid leaves the rumen. This is a signal to the mammary gland if there's a lot of unsaturated fatty acids at the mammary gland that something is wrong. The rumen is not working the way it should. My nutrition is being compromised in some way, shape, or form. The rumen is not working the way it should. It's not extracting fat. So what the mom does, the udder does, is saying, "Hey, I'm going to take care of myself first. The calf's going to have to suffer." So excess saturated fats shut down triglyceride synthesis in the mammary gland. So we know that the synthesis of triglycerides in the mammary gland accounts for half of the triglyceride export or the milk fat. If we shut that down, we're going to lose 50% of our milk fat, and that leads to milk fat depression. So what we're doing here is the signal, the unsaturated fats in the mammary gland are shutting down this function right here. We're shutting down the made function here. We're not doing that or making that fat anymore. We're saving it for the energy for the cow. We're shorting the calf. Okay, so what's happening in milk fat depression? We've got a shutdown of the mammary synthesis of fat, so that accounts for 50%. So if we have 50% less fat in a Holstein, we're looking at 2% milk fat. That qualifies as milk fat depression. The transfer will continue, assuming she's got some stuff off her back, some stuff from her diet, as long as it's there. But it's the de novo synthesis, the mammary gland saying, "Hey, there's something wrong with the rumen. We got." So we're thinking about metabolism. We might want to think about how body weight is interpreted. We know that if you're shipping out a cow, they're going to want the rumen empty. So we look at shrunk weights, rumen fill. So we think about a cow's body weight. She's got her empty body weight, how much she stays there without anything in the guts, without anything in the udder, without a pregnancy. All those are going to add weight. So empty body weight, basically taking out the um, guts one way or the other. We might say GI contents 250 pounds, milk at any one time, maybe 50 pounds in the udder. Conceptus depends on where you are. Last 2 months of lactation, you've got significant uterus growth and significant fetus growth. So all that's going to end up. But we're going to focus on in the empty body weight here. So think about empty body weight, condition score 3 animal. We're going to have take that animal. We're just going to say she's about 1,200 pounds. That might work out to a mid lactation animal, condition score 3 at the dairy, being around 1,500 pounds. So as we lose empty body weight, we lose muscle, we lose adipose, and we reduce the weight in both reduce the weight going down. So we're at 86% of body weight, 73% of body weight. As we go up, we add body condition. We're going to add more to that cow. So not negating contents, negating milk, all these things. You'd add this. This might be an 1,800-pound cow. So we're looking at, in this case, about 170 pounds of uh, body weight per condition score. 106. So we think about the empty body weight composition. We know thin cows have much more protein um, as a percent of body weight than fat. As the animal goes up in condition score, she's going to have a greater percentage of her empty body weight as fat. These three components, ash, protein, ash, and water, tend to move together. You can see that they're all being diluted out by the increase in fat. So these are going up, these three are going down. So as we get higher body condition, we have a uh, uh, increase in the percentage of fat, decrease in the percentage of protein. So if we think about the net energy in a body condition score, so from a 1 to a 2, a 2 to a 3, a 3 to a 4, and a 4 to a 5, we can see that each of these steps increases the amount. So this is mostly protein, or more protein than fat. This is a lot more fat. Fat has more calories per pound than protein. So the energy associated with that body condition score is going to go up. If you've had nutrition before, you know that the ratio of carbohydrate to fat is 2.25 times as much fat per gram. So we see that the protein as well. We see that difference. So as fat becomes a larger proportion of each body condition score, protein replaced by fat, you're going to see an increase in calories as you. So let's kind of go through the math here. How much milk is in one body condition score? We're going to say we're in that 3 range. We're going to say one body condition score is about 120 pounds. 120 pounds is going to be 170 megacalories of net energy lactation. At 117 megacalories of net energy lactation will support 1,250 pounds of fat corrected milk. So the phrase I will use, the next pound of intake will produce up to 3 pounds of milk. So here's where the math comes from. You can assume a high cal ration is 0.78 megacalories per pound of dry matter. Pasture is similar, and 1 pound of fat corrected milk, 4.0 is 0.33 megacals. 3% is 0.28 megacals. If you divide this by either one of these, you're going to get 2 to 3 pounds of milk for each pound of additional dry matter. So I think this goes in about close to 3 times there. a little bit short. This goes closer to 2 with the 4%. So more energy in here than in here. So if we're looking at nutrient balance, so energy balance, positive or negative, if a cow is consuming feed, how does that go toward milk production? We know that early lactation, cows are in negative energy balance. They're going to be pulling body reserves off their back. As the lactation wears on, they're going to shift over into positive energy balance to rebuild that condition score. So 3.5, work our way down to a 2.5, and then we work our way back up to a 3.5 at the end of lactation. So energy partitioning, positive energy balance is intake is greater than the need. We're usually gaining weight, and that's called anabolism. Negative energy balance intake is less than the need. So we're ripping the body apart. We're pulling stuff off her back. That's called catabolism. So here's the efficiencies, pounds of milk per pound of dry matter intake. That's overall diet efficiency compared with overall milk production. Negative energy balance. Where are the components of milk going to come from? So you're going to have the diet in negative energy balance contributing toward milk. You're also going to have the fat tissue contributing toward milk and the muscle contributing toward milk. So you're going to have a greater efficiency of milk production because you're adding these two nutrient streams that are not accounted for by intake. So our efficiency goes up. So milk produced per pound of intake, but we're also getting milk calories, milk components from two other sources. So not necessarily accounted for energy. Later lactation, she's rebuilding her body condition score. She's taking her nutrients and putting it toward milk, so fat, lactose, and protein. But she's also taking the extra ones and putting it back into body condition as either fat or as muscle, and that's going to be used in next lactation. So we're splitting up in positive energy balance where our nutrients go. And this is going to reduce our inefficiency because some of the dry matter intake is not going to milk, so you're going to get less milk per pound of dry matter intake.